I don't accept Jewish supremacy. You suddenly go, no, you're an anti-Semite and you deserve to have your entire life destroyed. Anti-Semitism does not just imply Jews, right? It's anti-Semitic to say things against Palestinians as well. I'm being called an N-word. Why does it seem that Jewish people are able to get away with more? You have a black man who did something, it was wrong, he got hit down. If we can't call that Jewish supremacy, what can we call it?
My name is Joshua and I'm 19 years old and I reverted to Islam 2 years ago, alhamdulillah.
Did you know if you teach a revert like me how to pray Salah,
you get the reward every single time I pray?
Every time I wake up for Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib and Isha.
You get the reward.
But have you ever thought about who teaches a revert's children how to pray?
The reverts, of course.
And you keep getting the reward for generations.
Donate now and help 10 reverts.
Learn Salah for just £100.
Assalamu alaikum brothers and sisters. If you're watching this video and it's Salah time, please pause it and go pray and come back when you're done. Please check out the description section of this video to support the channel. I came across a segment where Candace Owens was debating a Jewish American commentator who was accusing her of prejudice against his community and the state of Israel, simply because Candace pointed out certain questionable individuals throughout history that happened to be Jewish, and due to her calling out the prolonged injustice taking place in Palestine. Candace, however, wasn't having it and was adamant that her speaking truthfully about any particular community or country has nothing to do with discrimination, but instead is more about her right to speak freely about what she believes is right and wrong. Let's watch the first clip.
You saying that I'm engaging in conspiracy, even something as simple as saying when you say they, when did Jewish people suddenly get the right to the word they? Now we're taking this word and it implies that every time you use this English word that you've been using since you could speak English, this automatically means that you're talking about Jewish people. And you need to be extra sensitive every time you type out this word because of October 7th. I just can't subject myself to that. So if there's a specific allegation regarding a conspiracy that you think that I perpetuated, I would like to answer for it, but I would like a, you know, a specific allegation and not just like you say they sometimes, because they is a word and I have a right to use it.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I'm talking about in specifically when you're talking about a Jewish person that you feel that you've clashed with, and then jump from that to say, what's really going on here? And not focusing on the actions of individual people, but to say, I'm just going to say it like there's Jewish gangs out there, or I'm just going to say it like this pattern of focusing on, no, not a lot of people know that in Nazi Germany, when they were burning books, the first book they burned was a Jewish pedophile. Was that not something you talked about on the show?
That was.
So I'm just saying, in an isolated context of if we're having an academic discussion about certain things in history, I can understand wanting to be able to cover everything.
I say an entire episode of what I want to say very plainly, and then I'm taking out of context because I think that after October 7th, a lot of people have grown hysterical and they're looking for every time you talk about a Jewish person. Case in point, obviously, rather notoriously, when Andrew Klavan, and you just referenced it, talking about Magnus Hirschfeld and his institute being burned to the ground. This Jewish pervert happens to be Jewish pervert. Out of context, meaning that you stripped that I mentioned 4 Christians in that exact same monologue before I got to Magnus Hirschfeld. How do you just completely strip that out and pretend that this was a monologue about Jewish people? Actually, what's really happening is that you are defending Jewish people because every time you hear a Jewish name, you think that you somehow have a right to defend it. And to the second point, and I'll tell you what really bothers me about this, when you say you're talking about Jewish gangs have always existed in America. So I don't know why this is like suddenly something that we're going, you can't say that there could plausibly be a Jewish gang. For some reason, Jewish people think that they're just like in a special category where you're just not allowed to ever allege that they were in gangs, even though there's nonstop evidence in American history that Jewish gangs did exist. And they had a ton of power. You can go back to Prohibition. You can go back to the Jewish gangs that, were quite literally the Jewish Defense League that were putting bombs under people's cars. To say that you don't have a right to even imply there's a Jewish gang is just a nonsense. David Horowitz of the Horowitz Freedom Center, he's a despicable human being. When I say, oh, wow, look at this issue going on post October 7th, you suddenly go, no, you're an anti-Semite of the week and you deserve to have your entire life destroyed. I don't accept Jewish supremacy, and that's what it sounds like to me. The people that get the most coverage on my show are white people. I'm constantly pointing to what's happening in their TikTok trends and what they're doing, and they're not offended. So it actually, to me, is like snowflake culture that's gone writ large in the Jewish community, and they're just calling everything anti-Semitism, and I'm consistent. I find it boring, and I'm not going to be like persuaded against talking about these topics because there's a Jewish sensitivity. Sigmund Freud was also in that segment. He happens to be Jewish. I simply said their names, and Jewish people got offended. They just cannot handle that there could have been a Jewish pervert that existed. I find that to be quite bizarre. Like you're actually not required because you're a Jewish person and this guy happens to be Jewish to defend him.
As Candace said, vocalising glaringly obvious observations about Jewish elites or the Israeli government is not a conspiracy theory, nor should it warrant the policing of everyday language. Candace's guest falsely accused her of targeting the Jewish community as a whole, simply because she has called out the illegal activities of Jewish gangs and Jewish individuals who have abused children. As she said, since Israel began its genocidal campaign in Gaza 2 years ago, there has been an increased sensitivity to any critique of Jewish people, even if it's justified. Candace clarified that she's called out the bad behaviour of non-Jewish individuals, more so than that of Jewish people, yet she has still been unfairly tarnished with the false accusation of anti-Semitism. Like Candace said, she has every right to call out the bad behaviour in any community, and proceeded to list off examples of Jewish extremism that should be addressed for the safety of the wider public. Candace correctly labelled the blatant censorship around this, along with the actions of the Israeli regime, as Jewish supremacy. Let us watch the next clip.
I had a Jewish friend who had messaged me and asked me, can you publicly disavow these people that are saying bad stuff about Jews? What an absurd notion. Welcome to the internet. Every time I've logged on, I'm being called an N-word. I'm being called a house N-word. And I've never reached out to my Jewish friends and said, hey, could you do me a favor and disavow these random accounts on the internet? It's like, grow up. I'm sorry. If this is too much for you to handle on Twitter, log off. You're adults. This is how the internet works. But you're so forgiving when Bibi Netanyahu goes a literal DEFCON 3 on Palestinians. People are so forgiving when Rabbi Shmuley harasses me for 2 years openly. I didn't see where is the response? Where is the cancel Rabbi Shmuley? Get him out of here. He's awful. It's just not the same treatment. So that is the reason why people at this time will say, okay, why does it seem that Jewish people are able to get away with more? You have a black man who did something, it was wrong, he got hit down. You know, you have a Jewish person, they are just feeling so comfortable. Like Rabbi Shmuley, he's like, I can do a 2-year open harassment campaign and no one's going to touch me. What is that? If we can't call that Jewish supremacy, what can we call it?
Your whole contention is like Jews think they're above scrutiny and better than everybody else.
Jews.
Is that
I would never make that statement because that's a very broad statement.
Okay.
But
so
like I said, Rabbi Barclay is obviously a Jewish supremacist. I mean, that's like so obvious to me that he's a Jew supremacist. I think any person objectively listening to the conversation between me and Rabbi Barclay would reasonably acknowledge that he is a supremacist.
On the Barclay conversation, there was one moment that came up that I think really needs clarification, and it was your discussion on the definition of anti-Semitism. And I know you objected to this idea that, I guess it could just be anything I say.
No, it doesn't mean
racial
that.
bias.
Anti-Semitism does not just imply Jews, right? It's anti-Semitic to say things against Palestinians as well. Anti-Semitic to say things against Arabs.
Semantics.
That's not semantics. They are Semites.
In the current vernacular, when we say anti-Semitism, we're talking about Jews.
Too many people are being thrown into this camp of people who hate Jews, and it's just not real. Like I'm not afraid to offend a Jew. That's like that. Whatever that is, whatever word you got to give that. I'm not afraid to call out Jewish people when they're behaving badly. Okay, and that is offensive to some people who think that there's some special category, doesn't exist in my head or anywhere else. So they just get offended when I say this was a bad person who was Jewish. So let me ask you a question. What have Jewish people done bad in human history? And I'm not saying this in a way as like we need to assign collective guilt. I'm just saying, have Jewish people ever done anything bad throughout human history?
Jewish individuals certainly have done bad things. You cannot ascribe malice to entire groups of people. That's racist.
Okay, so you would agree then that saying like the Germans is not the right thing to do, the Palestinians, this would equally be as wrong. To say the Germans, the Palestinians, any sort of that rhetoric would be completely wrong based on your...
It's low, and it's low resolution.
Okay, because a lot of times you will see that they're very comfortable kind of assigning collective guilt when you go backwards and you're like, this was done to the Jews by these people and these people and these people. And I'm like, okay, but then suddenly like let's get real specific if you're talking about a bad Jewish individual. If someone says there could be a Jewish gang, you're not in it, so who cares? There could be a black gang on the south side of Chicago. I'm not gonna be like, well, be careful when you're talking about Suge Knight and the things that he did in the past. Be careful. I'm just like, there's definitely Jewish gangs, there's definitely black gangs, there's Hispanic gangs, and I don't need to be all sensitive about it because I'm not in them. That's it. And I think if you guys employed that perspective of not having to defend the plausibility of a bad person, who it would go a very long way. Just don't defend bad Jewish people because you're not them. It's not collective.
Right.
Candace spoke about how she's been pressured about speaking up against random accounts on the internet by people from the Jewish community who she thought were her friends. As she said, this does not apply to every Jewish person, and I agree with her that the people asking this of her are making a completely unreasonable request. I find it disturbing that Candace has been on the receiving end of horrific racial slurs, but I can confirm that this is the reality online, with an alarming amount of small-minded individuals resorting to expressing their hatred in this way. Candace called out the hypocrisy of the people trying to silence her for having a balanced and truthful opinion, yet being totally okay with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu publicly making consistent death threats towards Palestinians. She also pointed out how these same supremacists condone harassment harassment campaigns against her by unhinged individuals from their own communities. Candace again put this down to Jewish supremacy and even gave the example of how people from her community would never be allowed to get away with such things. Candace also brilliantly flipped the weaponization of the term anti-Semitism when she outlined how Palestinians and Arabs are also Semites, which did not sit well with her guest and his victim narrative. As Candace said, every community should be held to account equally, with no one receiving any special treatment whatsoever. I like how Candace skillfully called out her guest's hypocrisy when she made the point that the same way he was falsely accusing her of collectively going against his community is how members of his community have actually collectively dehumanized Germans and Palestinians throughout history. Like she said, this type of generalization is wrong, no matter which group it's being applied to. Let's watch the last clip.
They're saying the conservative right seems to be kind of changing on Jews. And I had to clarify for them, no, actually, you are seeing a sentiment that's changing against Israel. And the reason for that has got absolutely nothing to do with Jews. Let me tell you, if October 7th happened in Boca Raton, there would not have been a question of unfettered allegiance to what was going on with Jews in America. Israel is a different equation, and that conversation is starting to shift because A, we see that as a foreign country. B, people are starting to call into question a lot of things Bibi Netanyahu has said that, to me, to hear a foreign leader speak about America as if he controls it makes me uncomfortable. And then the third thing is AIPAC, ADL shoving through laws through Congress. If you want to talk about not giving into Jewish conspiracies, John Greenblatt getting caught on the ADL on the hot mic talking about how we got to get rid of TikTok, and then tomorrow it gets passed through Congress isn't good. You know, we want separation. We don't want Israel in any capacity controlling our speech. The anti-Semitism bill was absolutely horrific, and it caused a reaction. That was against a foreign country having influence on American politics. And I think because it's all happening at the same time, it can be hard to dilute that and go, okay, actually, this isn't about Jewish people. They really just don't like what Israel is doing and the impact that AIPAC and ADL is having for specific reasons. You're going to make an enemy of me if you're caught on a hot mic like Bibi Netanyahu was, saying that if you criticize Israel, we're getting laws passed in America. If you criticize Israel, it's going to be a problem in your life. That's gangster talk. Don't care what his religion is, don't care what he thinks his race is. You got to now get out of American pockets. That's my view on Bibi Netanyahu, which I think a lot of conservative Americans feel as well.
What's different about Israel than any of these other countries? What's different?
Our relationship with Israel is different, I would say.
We fund lots of countries. I mean, we give a lot of aid to a lot of countries, but somehow when AIPAC is advocating for legislation,
well, AIPAC pays journalists. You know what I mean? This is part of the problem, where they were covering this issue feverishly. And I mean, on the New York Post, there are literal journalists who are in the IDF. You can just see it right on their thing. So there is this sort of marriage between America and Israel. And so I think what you could be reading as, well, why is it Israel? Part of it has to do with the fact because the media is insisting on us covering Israeli issues as if it's American. And so then people started paying attention to what was happening. Yeah, I'm going to critique Israel, I'm going to critique AIPAC, I'm going to critique the ADL in the same way that I critique Big Pharma, the same way that I critique the CDC, the FDA, and my own politicians. It's just people should just stop taking it so personal. I have no allegiance to Israel. I don't know. I'm just an American, and I would like more divorce in terms of our politics from Israel. You would, of course, because you've been there, you're Jewish, you've got heritage there. It's just weird when people are trying to make me feel that their ancestral or their heritage is mine. It's just not.
Candace made the point that people on the conservative right of the political spectrum being opposed to the criminal actions of the Israeli government does not equate to prejudice against the Jewish community. Candace put this growing sentiment down to the Israeli regime's constant interference in American and Western politics to benefit themselves at the expense of non-Israelis. She correctly called out Netanyahu's arrogant rhetoric that comes across as if he is blatantly showing off that he controls the US, as well as organisations like AIPAC and the ADL passing censorship laws in America and Europe that favour Israel. Candace's slippery guest tried to make the case that other countries, along with Israel, also receive funding from the US. But as Candace said, unlike Israel, other countries don't have political lobbies that fund Jewish American journalists who work in the US media and that have served in the Israeli army. If that's not a conflict of interest and foreign infiltration, I don't know what is. As Candace stated, the Western mainstream media are a propaganda machine for the Israeli government. And she, along with all of us, have every right to critique this complete corruption so that we can protect ourselves from being taken advantage of, and to make it clear that we do not want Israel to have control over our countries. In conclusion, this was a great debate performance by Candace, as she covered so many impactful points in quick succession, leaving her opponent in the dust. Thank you for watching. Make sure to join my free Telegram group via the the link in the description. And remember to like, subscribe and become a channel member for access to exclusive content. Until next time, inshallah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.